I know you are ready for a new story, but tonight we are going to dive into a different tale than the usual stories. This one is drenched in sand and glory, where freedom was merely a whisper among men who lived and died for the roar of the crowd, where valor was measured not in noble deeds, but in the precision of a blade and the will to survive another sunrise. However, I promise this isn't another story. It's a journey into the shadows of history, where truth lay buried beneath centuries of silence. A descent into the forgotten corners of the Roman Empire, where the words of those deemed unworthy to speak have finally found voice. These are the Flamma diaries, fragments of a life recorded in secret, preserved against all odds. I want to tell you about a time when the line between entertainment and execution was drawn in blood across sand-strewn arenas. When men were property, yet some found immortality through their suffering. An era when the masses craved spectacle above all else, and gladiators, though slaves in chains, could achieve a fame that echoed through millennia. From the dust of forgotten archives rose a name etched in history. Flamma, the Syrian flame who refused freedom 4 times to continue his reign in the arena. But who exactly was Flamma? The gladiator whose skill earned him the rudis, yet whose heart bound him to combat even when escape was offered. I challenge you to imagine the moment these diaries were discovered. Historians standing breathless in a forgotten chamber beneath an ancient villa, brushing dust from tablets that had not seen light for nearly 2 millennia. Picture their trembling hands as they realized whose voice had been preserved. Authentic, unfiltered, unprecedented. But Flamma's story and the documentation surrounding his life did not simply record victories and defeats. They revealed the inner thoughts of a man who lived between worlds, neither fully slave nor truly free. These painstakingly translated fragments offer what no historian could provide: the authentic voice of a gladiator who chose the arena over freedom, whose words now bridge the chasm of centuries. He wasn't born for legend, this Syrian warrior whose name would echo through centuries. Flamma emerged from obscurity, likely torn from his homeland and sold into the brutal life of a gladiator. No noble birth blessed him, no prophecy marked his coming. His legacy began not with glory, but with the cold iron of shackles and the harsh reality of a man whose only worth was measured by his ability to survive. But beneath the roaring crowds of the Colosseum, within Flamma's battle-scarred heart, something extraordinary took root. 4 times the rudis, the wooden sword of freedom, was offered to this man who fought 34 times in the arena. 4 times he refused. What madness or wisdom drove a slave to choose the sword over liberty? His choices defy our modern understanding, yet reveal a man whose identity became inseparable from the sand and blood. Are you ready to bear with me as we uncover how a Syrian slave transformed himself into Flamma? The flame, burning so brightly in the arena that even Emperor Tiberius himself took notice. How a man could find such purpose in combat that freedom itself held no allure. His story challenges everything we believe about human nature and the will to survive. Discover how Flamma mastered the art of the secutor, the pursuer gladiator, armed with shield and short sword. His technique became legendary, a perfect balance of defense and devastating counterattack. Even among the elite fighters of his day, Flamma stood apart. 21 victories, 9 draws, and only 4 defeats. No other gladiator of his era could claim such a record. Yet his greatest triumph may have been his refusal to leave the arena. He fought during the reign of Tiberius, when Rome's appetite for spectacle had grown insatiable. The crowds adored him, this foreigner who embodied Roman virtues more purely than many citizens. Picture the arena falling silent as Flamma stepped onto the sand, his opponents knowing they faced a living legend. But could any man truly choose such a life willingly? What secrets lay behind his refusal of freedom that the ancient historians never recorded? Scholars still debate Flamma's motivations. Some suggest he found identity and purpose in the arena that freedom could never provide. Others believe he accumulated wealth for family members, as successful gladiators could earn substantial sums. The paradox remains. A man simultaneously at the bottom of Roman society, yet celebrated like few others. His tombstone, discovered centuries later, bears his record with pride, suggesting that even in death, Flamma identified not as a Syrian, not as a slave, but as the gladiator who refused to stop fighting. What you're about to hear isn't merely a story. It's a voice that has traveled across 2 millennia to reach you. The diaries of Flamma, a Syrian gladiator who fought 34 times in Rome's blood-soaked arenas, have been meticulously reconstructed from fragments of history, inscriptions, and the whispered truths that survived the crushing weight of time. I've crafted these words to bridge the chasm between your world and his. Though separated by centuries, Flamma's struggles echo with surprising relevance. His questions about purpose, dignity, and freedom mirror our own. The victories etched into stone monuments tell only half his story. The true battles raged within his heart and mind. I promise this journey maintains historical authenticity while breathing life into the spaces between recorded facts. The core events: Flamma's 34 battles, his 4 wooden rudies, symbols of freedom offered and refused, his final resting place. These are documented in Roman records. But his thoughts, fears, and hopes, those I've excavated from the silent spaces of history. From the next chapter forward, you'll hear directly from Flamma himself. His voice will guide you through the harsh realities of the ludus, the roaring Colosseum, and the quiet moments between battles when a gladiator confronts his mortality. You'll witness Rome through the eyes of one who was both its entertainment and its captive. Now, relax in a comfortable position. Our stories don't require you to watch the video. They are narrated to guide you on a relaxing journey to fall asleep as you listen. Feel your body relaxing, your shoulders, your hips. A warm feeling slowly relaxes your entire body from head to toe, as if you are entering a warm bath of soothing water. Your body begins to relax as the water slowly rises from your feet to your legs, your torso, your shoulders. You feel every single muscle becoming more and more relaxed. Feel the comfort of this moment. Focus on the story and allow the narrative to gently lead you toward a comfortable sleep. And now, let the world of our heroes begin. My name is Flamma. I was born free beneath Syria's sun, but fate delivered me to Rome in chains. I have died 34 times in the arena, yet here I breathe. I have been offered freedom 4 times, yet chosen the sword. Perhaps you wonder why a man would refuse liberty when it was extended like a gift. Listen, and I will tell you of glory and suffering, of choices made beneath death's shadow. My earliest memories were of salt and sea. Our village on Syria's coast was simple but beautiful. My father mended nets while my mother sold fish in the marketplace. I was called Malchus then, a name that tasted of home when spoken. I ran barefoot along shores where traders from distant lands brought stories as precious as their wares. The Mediterranean stretched before me like a promise, though I never imagined how cruelly that promise would be broken. They came with the dawn, Roman legionaries marching beneath eagles and standards. I was 15 when Emperor Tiberius's campaign swept through our lands. The screams still haunt my dreams. My father pushed me toward the olive groves, but a soldier's javelin found his back before I could flee. They dragged me from my hiding place, blood splattered and wild with grief. That day, I became property, not person. My name, my past, my future, all stripped away like flesh from bone. The journey inland was endless. Chained by the neck to 20 others, I stumbled across Syria's dusty heart. Those who fell were not helped up. The dead were simply uncoupled, their bodies left for scavengers. Thirst became my constant companion, hunger my shadow. At night, huddled against strangers who shared only my fate, I whispered my true name over and over, terrified I might forget it in this new world of lashes and Latin commands. The slave market in Antioch remains seared in my memory. The stench of unwashed bodies, the merchant's fingers prodding muscle like I was livestock. "This one has good shoulders," he said in Latin I barely understood. I was stripped, examined, my teeth checked like a horse's. A wealthy Roman called me Syrian dog before passing me by. Later, a lanista, a trainer of gladiators, paused before me. His eyes were calculating, measuring my frame for potential rather than immediate worth. "This one," the lanista said, pointing at me. Coins changed hands, and my chains changed owners. As they branded me with the mark of my new master, I bit through my lip to keep from screaming. That night, in a cart bound for Capua, the lanista tossed me stale bread. "You're not worth feeding yet," he said, "but you will be." Then he gave me my new name, Flamma, Flame, as if he saw something in me that I could not yet see in myself. I first saw the gladiatorial ludus from a cage. Men trained in its dusty yard, their bodies scarred but powerful, moving with deadly precision. Some had once been warriors, others criminals, many slaves like me. "You'll die here," whispered a Thracian beside me. "We all do." But as I watched the fighters, something unexpected stirred within me. Not hope exactly, but possibility. If I must die, I thought, perhaps I could choose how. If I could not be free, I could at least be remembered. The ludus gate swallowed me like a beast devouring its prey. That first day, my chains were replaced with wooden practice swords. Rudies, they called them, heavier than real blades to build strength. My arms trembled under their weight as the lanista barked orders. "Syrian," he shouted, studying my frame. "You'll fight in the Syrian style." I didn't know then how those words would define my life. Dawn broke before the cockerels crow at the ludus. We rose in darkness, bodies aching from yesterday's beatings, to train until our muscles screamed for mercy. The lanistai showed none. "Again," they'd roar when I collapsed. My first month I tasted more dirt than food, my body a map of bruises. At night I lay among strangers, men who might someday kill me or die by my hand. They broke us to rebuild us stronger. Our diet changed, barley, beans, dried fruit for strength. My body transformed, shedding the softness of my former life. The wooden palisade became my enemy and friend. I struck it 1,000 times daily until my hands bled and calloused. Some men died in training, their bodies carted away without ceremony. I vowed not to join them. Something in me refused to break. Docilius, an aging Lannister with a face like cracked leather, noticed me. "You move differently," he said, circling as I trained. He'd been a champion once before his leg was shattered. Under his guidance, I learned to fight as a Syrian. Shield and curved sword, quick footwork, deadly precision. The crowd doesn't want just death, he taught me. They want artistry in killing. Give them beauty with your blade. 6 months transformed me. My body became a weapon, hardened, responsive, dangerous. I learned to read men's intentions in their eyes before they moved. The Syrian style suited me. I was quick where others were strong, precise where they were brutal. The Lannister began pairing me against the veterans. When I bested them, I saw something new in their eyes. Respect mingled with fear. The night before my first arena fight, I couldn't sleep. Fear coursed through me like poison, yet beneath it lurked something unexpected. Hunger. Not for blood, but for the roar that would greet my name, for proof that I was more than property. Docilius found me staring at the stars through barred windows. "Tomorrow you become real," he said. "Remember, in the arena, we're more than slaves. We're gods of moments." The armor felt foreign against my skin, bronze plates strapped too tightly across my chest. My hands trembled as priests sacrificed a lamb, its blood spattering the sand. When they pushed the gladius into my grip, I nearly dropped it. The words of the oath burned in my throat. I will endure to be burned, to be bound, to be beaten, and to be killed by the sword. They led us through dark tunnels beneath the arena. My opponent, Corvus, a scarred veteran with 20 victories, sneered at my trembling. The gates creaked open, and blinding sunlight assaulted my eyes. The crowd's roar hit me like a physical blow. 10,000 voices merged into one beast, hungry for blood. My blood. The provincial arena wasn't the Colosseum, but in that moment, it might as well have been. Corvus circled like a predator, testing my defenses with casual flicks of his trident. My shield felt impossibly heavy. His first real strike sent me stumbling backward, the crowd laughing. The second opened a gash across my thigh. I tasted copper, my own blood from biting my tongue. Fear clouded my vision. I was going to die here, forgotten, my bones mixed with the sand. Then, something strange happened. As Corvus lunged, time seemed to slow. I saw the path of his trident before it struck. My body moved without thought, sliding past his attack. My gladius found the gap beneath his arm guard. The crowd's surprise mirrored my own. Corvus stumbled back, respect replacing mockery in his eyes. Something awakened in me, a terrible, wonderful clarity. We danced across the blood-soaked sand, my fear transforming into something else, a savage joy. Each clash of metal sang to me. Each near miss made my heart pound with life. When Corvus fell to his knees, disarmed and bleeding, I stood over him, chest heaving. The editor looked to the crowd, their thumbs hovering between life and death. I realized with horror that I wanted them to turn down. Corvus lived. The crowd spared him for fighting well. As they cheered my name, Flamma! Flamma! I felt sick triumph coursing through me. I had survived, but at what cost? Walking from the arena, laurel crown heavy on my brow, I understood a terrible truth. I had never felt more alive than when fighting for my life. The arena had awakened something in me that could never again sleep. The first time I killed a man in the arena, the crowd fell silent. Blood pooled around my feet as I stood over my fallen opponent, a brute from Gaul who had boasted he would tear my limbs apart. Instead, my blade found his throat. The lanista watched with narrow eyes as I raised my sword. No applause came at first, only a collective breath held, then released in a roar that shook the wooden stands. They had not expected the Syrian to win. My early fights taught me the value of speed over strength. While Roman-born gladiators relied on brute force, I used the agility I had developed hunting in Syria's rocky hills. 3 months after my first victory, I faced a net fighter who thought me easy prey. He never saw my feint, the move that became my first signature. When he stumbled, I was already behind him. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "Look how he moves like fire." The Romans had a fascination with foreign fighters. We were exotic beasts to them, creatures from distant lands bringing strange techniques to their sacred games. My lanista, Quintus, recognized this appeal. "Fight like a Syrian," he advised. "Show them something they haven't seen." So I incorporated the circular footwork of my homeland's wrestlers, creating a style that made me unpredictable. The arena became my stage, each match a performance. It was during my 7th fight that the name came. I faced a champion, a man who had killed 14 opponents. Twice my size, his strength seemed overwhelming. But I moved like wind around him, striking, retreating, my blade catching sunlight with each pass. As his frustration grew, his movement slowed. When I finally delivered the killing blow, a senator rose to his feet. "Flamma!" he shouted. "The flame!" The crowd took up the chant. My shield became an extension of my arm, not just protection, but a weapon. I developed a technique of striking with its edge to unbalance opponents before delivering the final thrust. The crowds began attending specifically to see Flamma fight. Strange how they cheered my name. A name not my own, not the one my mother had whispered to me as a child. Yet I embraced it, understanding that entertainment meant survival. The more they loved Flamma, the longer I would live. Soon I was recognized in Rome's streets. Children would mimic my stance. Merchants offered gifts for my favor. Yet each night I returned to my cell, chains around my ankles. Celebrity and slavery, 2 faces of the same coin. My Syrian name faded from memory, like footprints in sand, while Flamma burned bright in the public's imagination. Perhaps it was better this way. The boy from Syria had died on the auction block. Flamma rose from those ashes, a man with a future, if only from one fight to the next. I quickly learned that the arena was as much a political battlefield as a physical one. When Senator Lucius Calpurnius first approached my lanista after my 10th victory, I naively believed he admired my skill. The truth was more calculating. "This Sicilian has fire," he said, as though I weren't standing before him. "He'll make a fine centerpiece for the games I'm sponsoring next month." I was merely a pawn in his campaign for public favor. Calpurnius taught me my first lesson in Roman politics. The games he sponsored coincided with Tiberius's decision on grain subsidies. By presenting spectacular matches, with me as his champion, he positioned himself as a man of the people. I fought with particular ferocity that day, understanding that my performance reflected on my temporary master. The crowd's adoration of me transferred to him exactly as he'd planned. By my 5th year, I recognized the patterns. Before elections, more games appeared. When scandal touched a noble family, they sponsored matches of unprecedented splendor. I became adept at reading which patrons needed a quick kill versus those who preferred a prolonged spectacle. The equestrian Marcellus, my most frequent patron, wanted artistry, deaths that told a story. "Make them weep before you kill," he instructed me once. I learned to manipulate the crowd as skillfully as any politician. A dramatic stumble followed by a heroic recovery. A moment of apparent mercy that made my eventual kill more thrilling. The audience believed they witnessed authentic combat, never suspecting how carefully I orchestrated their emotions. Their reactions, in turn, determined which powerful Romans sought my services next. It was a dance of death and influence. Sometimes politics demanded specific outcomes. When the nephew of Sejanus, Tiberius's powerful prefect, sponsored games in 27 CE, my opponent was a German captive beloved by the masses. My lanista visited me the night before. "Tomorrow, you fight well, but lose," he whispered. The German must win. I understood the unspoken truth Sejanus's faction needed to appear merciful to counter rumors of cruelty. I complied, sustaining a theatrical wound that allowed my opponent to spare me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Though legally a slave, I held influence that many free Romans envied. Senators consulted my lanista about which dates might be most fortuitous for their games. Wealthy merchants paid bribes just to be seen conversing with me. Women of noble birth sent secret gifts. I remained property, yet I'd mastered the political arena in ways my owners never could. In chains, I'd found a peculiar kind of power. The ludus was a strange brotherhood. Men bound not by blood, but by iron and sweat. We who might one day kill each other shared bread, wine, and whispered dreams in the dark. Doctor called us brothers of the sword, a family forged in violence. I learned quickly that survival meant more than strength. It required allies. Some nights, listening to the veterans' tales, I glimpsed what kept men sane in this madness. Marcus became my first true friend. A grizzled Thracian with 20 victories, he saw something in me worth cultivating. "Keep your shield higher," he'd growl, then demonstrate with bruising efficiency. At night, he taught me to mend wounds, to read opponents' weaknesses, to survive. "Glory is for poets," he would say. "We fight for tomorrow's breath." When fever took him that winter, I wept like a child beside his pallet. Then came Numerius, barely 17, eyes wide with terror when he arrived. I recognized my former self in him and took him under protection. Teaching steadied me somehow. "Watch how I pivot," I'd instruct, guiding his trembling hands. Before battles, we shared a ritual, a prayer to Nemesis, a clasping of wrists. His first victory feast remains among my fondest memories, his boyish pride warming something long cold within me. Tiberius was my opposite, Gaulish, arrogant, naturally gifted. Our rivalry began with bloodied noses and ended in reluctant respect. We pushed each other beyond limits, competing for Doctora's rare praise. "You fight like a dying man," he once taunted. I replied, "Better than a man already dead." After matches, we'd drink together, recounting each other's mistakes with brutal honesty. No one made me better. No one understood me more. Women were forbidden in the ludus, but fame brought privileges. After my 10th victory, I caught Livia's eye, a merchant's daughter who attended every match. Notes passed through the guards became meetings in shadowed corners. Her fingers tracing my scars, her whispers of freedom became another reason to survive. Other brothers found comfort with servant girls or admirers. These stolen moments of tenderness amid brutality kept our humanity intact, however fragile. The day came when Numerius and I were matched to fight. The Lannister's cruel smile told me it was no accident. That morning we performed our ritual in silence. In the arena, our eyes met above raised shields. The crowd roared for blood, our blood, brothers of the sword, now enemies by decree. I felt my heart fracture even as I raised my blade. Some wounds, I learned that day, never truly heal. The crowd's roar crashed over me like a wave as I stood over Maximus the Thracian, his blood pooling beneath my feet. He had been undefeated for 3 years, a champion of champions, until today. My victory had been brutal, precise, and undeniable. The editor of the games, a wealthy senator hosting this spectacle for his son's coming of age, rose from his seat. Something in his hand caught the sunlight. A wooden sword, the rudis, freedom. Time slowed. The wooden sword hovered between us, an offering I had never dared imagine. 15 years of blood and sand flashed before my eyes. The day I was captured in Gaul, the branding, the endless training, the first man I killed for entertainment, and now this small piece of carved wood that meant I could walk away from it all. The crowd chanted my name, Flamma, Flamma. Their voices thundered against the walls of the Colosseum. My heart hammered against my ribs. Freedom. The word tasted strange, almost forgotten. What would I do? Where would I go? A foreigner with scars and no trade beyond killing. In the ludus, I had food, shelter, purpose. Outside those walls waited uncertainty. I had seen freed gladiators begging in the streets, their glory days reduced to tales told for copper coins. Was that to be my fate? The wooden sword trembled slightly in the editor's outstretched hand. I looked into the crowd, thousands of faces blending together, yet all focused on me. They loved me here. I was Flamma, the unconquerable. In the arena, I was someone. Beyond it, nobody. The adoration in their eyes was intoxicating, more potent than any wine I had tasted. And there was something else. Something I had never admitted. I had grown to love the fight itself. The clarity of purpose, the dance with death, the moment when skill and will determined everything. I stepped back. The crowd fell silent, sensing the weight of the moment. I raised my sword and shield high, then lowered my eyes to the editor. "I choose the arena," I declared, my voice carrying across the sudden hush. The wooden sword lowered, confusion crossing the editor's face. No one refused the rudis. No one chose chains over freedom. But they did not understand. These sands had become my home, this roar my family. Here, I was immortal. The silence broke. The crowd erupted in a frenzy unlike anything I had heard before. They screamed my name, threw flowers and coins. I had given them something rarer than victory. I had given them devotion. That night in my cell, I traced the scars on my arms in the moonlight. Perhaps I had chosen another type of freedom, the freedom to be exactly who I had become. As I drifted to sleep, I wondered if I would be offered the rudies again, and if I would always taste the bitterness of almost on my tongue. My name echoed through the empire like thunder. By my 30th year, I had become a legend in the arena. Flamma, Flamma, they chanted, thousands of voices merging into one roaring beast. Wealthy citizens journeyed from distant provinces just to witness my fights. Some traveled for weeks, crossing seas and mountains, all to see if the tales of my prowess were true. I never disappointed them. 21 victories and counting, each one adding to my growing myth. Fame brought unexpected comforts. My quarters in the ludus expanded from a cell to chambers befitting a champion. The lanista ensured I ate the finest meats and freshest fruits. Admirers sent gifts, wine, jewelry, even scented oils from Egypt. After victories, women of all classes sought my company. Noble women sent discreet messages through servants, while merchants' daughters made bolder advances. I indulged, though always aware these pleasures could end with my next defeat. My likeness appeared throughout Rome. Artisans crafted small clay figurines of me in fighting stance, sold to enthusiastic spectators after matches. Crude graffiti of my victories decorated alley walls. Wealthy patrons commissioned pottery bearing my image. A wine merchant even named a vintage after me. Flamma's Fury, he called it. I once watched a child play with a wooden toy shaped like me. Strange to be both man and object simultaneously. With glory came danger. The lanista matched me against increasingly fearsome opponents. Men larger, stronger, more desperate. Other gladiators in the ludus grew envious. Some became allies, others enemies who whispered behind my back. I found my food tampered with twice, my training equipment mysteriously damaged. I slept lightly, one eye always open. The price of fame was eternal vigilance, for success made me both revered and resented. The contradiction of my existence grew sharper with each passing month. I could bring 20,000 Romans to their feet, make patricians and plebeians alike scream my name in adoration. Yet at day's end, I remained property, my life's worth measured in coin. I ate from silver plates but wore iron shackles when traveling between cities. Women who sought my bed would never take me as husband. I was entertainment, not man, celebrated but never respected. The turning point came when Demetrius, a Greek fighter nearly as renowned as myself, earned his freedom after 12 years. I watched him receive the wooden rudies from the praetor's hand. The crowd cheered as his master touched his shoulder one final time. That night, alone in my quarters, I hurled a gifted silver cup against the wall. 34 victories, 9 draws, no defeats, and still a slave. Was this glory worth the price of chains? For the first time, I questioned the bargain I had made with fate. Word spread through the ludus like wildfire. Emperor Tiberius himself would attend the games. Our lanista drove us mercilessly in preparation. "The emperor's eyes will be upon you," he bellowed, striking any who faltered. I trained until my muscles screamed, perfecting every stance, every strike. Sleep eluded me as I imagined fighting before the most powerful man in the world. What would he see in me? A Syrian slave or a gladiator worthy of imperial attention. The day arrived with unprecedented pageantry. The arena had been transformed. Purple banners hung from every arch. Gold eagles gleamed in the sun. Security was suffocating. Praetorians stood at every entrance, their eyes cold and watchful. The holding cells beneath the arena buzzed with nervous energy. Men who normally boasted fell silent. Even the most seasoned fighters checked their armor repeatedly. I fingered the Syrian amulet hidden beneath my sublegaculum, silently praying to gods I barely remembered. When I emerged into the arena, the roar was deafening. The crowd, normally a faceless mass, seemed sharper somehow. I saw senators in their white togas with purple stripes, wealthy merchants, foreign dignitaries, all there for the spectacle. And above them all, the imperial box where Tiberius reclined, distant yet unmistakable. My opponent was no ordinary gladiator, but a German giant, clearly chosen for the emperor's entertainment. His muscles rippled like a bull's as he saluted the imperial box. The fight was brutal. The German was stronger, but I was quicker. His sword whistled past my ear as I ducked and countered, drawing first blood across his thigh. The crowd's approval washed over me like wine. In that moment, I forgot myself and glanced toward the imperial box. Tiberius had leaned forward, those legendary cold eyes fixed directly on me. Our gazes locked for the briefest moment, the slave and the emperor, before I spun away from another deadly strike. Victory came at a price. My shoulder was dislocated, ribs cracked, but I stood while the German lay defeated. When I raised my eyes to seek the emperor's verdict, Tiberius made the gesture of life, then did something extraordinary. He raised his hand in acknowledgement. The crowd erupted. Later, a palace servant delivered a small purse of gold coins and a message: "The emperor found your performance pleasing." Such simple words, yet they elevated me instantly among my fellow gladiators. That night, as pain kept me from sleep, I contemplated the strange world I inhabited. For a few moments, I had commanded the attention of the most powerful man in the known world. Nobles had cheered my name. Yet when dawn broke, I remained a slave, my life not my own. Rome's glory was built on this contradiction, that a man could be simultaneously celebrated and owned. I traced the outline of the emperor's coins beneath my pillow and wondered if Tiberius ever contemplated such ironies. My body had become a battlefield map, each scar a memory etched in flesh. The jagged line across my ribs reminded me of the Thracers, who nearly ended me in my 27th year. The puncture below my collarbone came from a Gaul's spear that missed my heart by a finger's width. By my 33rd year, I no longer remembered what unmarked skin felt like. Pain had become my constant companion, some mornings so fierce I could barely rise from my pallet. The Ludus doctor had saved my life more times than I cared to count. I still remembered the searing agony of hot iron closing the gash in my thigh after a retiarius caught me with his trident. The smell of my own burning flesh haunted my dreams. For lesser wounds, there were poultices of herbs, wine to clean the cuts, and tight bandaging. The doctor's hands were skilled, but his tools primitive. Many brothers in arms died not from their wounds, but from the fever that followed. Recovery was its own battle. After the Dacian shattered my shield arm in 3 places, I spent weeks with it bound tightly to my chest. The Lanista gave me 6 weeks before forcing me back into training. The bone had barely knit. Each block with my shield sent splinters of pain through my arm. I learned to grit my teeth and continue. The crowds did not pay to see damaged men make excuses. They paid for blood, whether it was my opponent's or my own. My body adapted. When the Numidian's blade took part of my vision in my right eye, I learned to turn my head slightly to compensate. After my knee was crushed in the games honoring the Emperor's birthday, I developed a different stance, shifting my weight to protect the weakness. Each injury taught me new ways to survive. The other gladiators called me Vulcan, the crippled god who forged weapons of war. I took it as a mark of respect. At night, when sleep eluded me, I catalogued my wounds like a merchant counting his wares. 3 broken ribs that never healed properly. A shoulder that slipped from its socket in cold weather. The deep puncture in my calf that still wept fluid after 5 years. The missing fingers on my left hand. The constant ringing in my ears from a shield bash that had knocked me unconscious for 2 days. Each injury was a testament to my survival, yet each brought me closer to my end. I had seen old gladiators, those rare few who lived long enough to earn their wooden sword of freedom. They shuffled through the streets of Rome, bodies twisted and broken, begging for wine to dull their constant pain. Even if I survived each coming battle, my body was failing me piece by piece. At 34, I was already considered ancient in the arena. How much longer could I fight? And what would remain of me when the fighting ended? These questions haunted me more than death itself. I stood in the arena again, blood spattered and victorious. 5 years had passed since my first refusal of the Rudes. Rome itself had changed. Emperor Tiberius now spent most of his time in Capri, leaving Sejanus to govern. My opponent that day had been Copperphorus, the beast of Carthage, undefeated for 3 years. When my sword found the gap in his armor, 60,000 voices erupted. I had not expected to survive, let alone triumph so completely. Praetor Quintus Veranius approached the imperial box, speaking with the consul. I knew what was coming. The crowd fell silent as the praetor turned toward me, holding aloft the wooden sword, freedom offered for the 2nd time. The spectators began chanting my name, "Flamma! Flamma!" Their voices thundered through the Colosseum. I saw the surprise in the praetor's eyes when I shook my head. No Roman expected a gladiator to refuse freedom twice. The night before, Drusus, an older gladiator who had fought alongside me for years, had questioned my resolve. "Take the Rudes this time," he had urged in our quarters. "You've proven yourself. What more could you want?" I couldn't explain it then, even to him. The truth was complicated. Freedom terrified me more than any opponent. In the arena, I understood my purpose. Outside those walls, I would be nothing but a former slave with scars and nightmares. My lanista, Titus, had profited enormously from my fame. When rumors of another Rudes offer reached him, he visited me privately. "The crowds love your loyalty to the arena," he said, calculating as always. "Your first refusal became legend. A second, immortality." He didn't need to mention the increased value of my fights afterward. I understood the business of glory well enough by then. My refusals had become part of my identity. The gladiator who chose the sword over freedom. After my second refusal, the Emperor himself sent a golden armband as recognition of my service. The inscription read, "To Flamma, who chose Rome over himself. The irony wasn't lost on me. Romans celebrated my choice while never truly understanding it. That night, Marcus, a fellow Samnite fighter, found me staring at the gift. "You're trapped now," he said without judgment. "They'll never let you be anything but this." He was right. I had sealed my fate with that second refusal. Romans spoke endlessly of libertas while understanding nothing of true freedom. To them, my choice was incomprehensible. Why choose death over life? But in the arena, I found what they never could: perfect clarity. Each fight stripped away pretense, leaving only raw existence. Outside, men lived in constant fear of saying the wrong thing to the wrong person. Their freedom was an illusion. Mine was the honest choice, to live fully in the arena rather than wander half dead through their world of whispers and lies. Among all my opponents, one name still burns in my memory: Tigris of Gaul. We first clashed in the summer of 35 CE, when I had already claimed 20 victories. Tall and fair-haired, wielding a massive axe, his fighting style was wild and unpredictable, the complete opposite of my disciplined technique. That first match ended in a draw, both of us bloodied but standing. The crowd roared with approval, sensing the birth of something special. Our second encounter came 3 months later. The promoters had plastered Rome with notices: Flamma versus Tigris, the rematch. The wealthy patrician Claudius Severus offered a special purse to the victor. I studied Tigris obsessively before our fight, watching him train from a distance. His overhead strikes were devastating, but left his right side exposed. When we met again, I exploited this weakness mercilessly, though he nearly took my head with a sweeping blow. Over 2 years, Tigris and I fought 6 times. Each contest pushed me to new heights. I learned to counter his axe with quicker footwork. He adapted to my shield tactics with crushing blows that numbed my arm. Between matches, we exchanged taunts through messengers and at public appearances. "Flamma fights like an old woman," he once declared at the baths. I responded by sending him a child's wooden sword. Our mutual hatred became legendary. Our fourth match changed everything. The Emperor himself attended, doubling the usual tension. Midway through the fight, Tigris caught me with a blow that shattered my shield. As I fell, the crowd gasped, expecting my death. Yet he stepped back, allowing me to retrieve a replacement shield. "I'll defeat you at your best, Syrian," he growled, "or not at all." From that moment, our rivalry transformed into something resembling respect. The Lannistas recognized the gold mine our rivalry had become. They arranged special training, better quarters, even wine and women after victories. Before our 6th match, they paraded us through the forum in open carts, encouraging the public to place wagers. Rome divided itself between supporters of the Syrian serpent and the Gallic giant. I overheard a senator boast he'd wagered his summer villa on my victory. The pressure was immense. Our final battle came during the Ludi Romani of 36 CE. After an hour of combat, both exhausted and bleeding, Tigris slipped on the blood-soaked sand. The crowd's thumbs turned down, demanding death. I looked to the Emperor, who nodded grimly. Yet, as I raised my sword, I hesitated. This man had made me greater. Instead, I cut a lock of his hair as trophy. The crowd erupted in disapproval, but the Emperor, surprisingly, signaled mercy. Tigris died 3 months later, poisoned by a jealous Lannista. I never found his equal again. I once despised them, the mob, the masses, the faceless thousands who filled the Colosseum. In my early years, they were nothing but a roaring beast demanding blood. My blood or my opponent's, they cared not which. Their hunger seemed insatiable, their judgment swift and merciless. I fought not for them, but despite them, each victory a defiant snarl at their collective thirst. By my 5th year, I began to see them differently. The mob dissolved into faces, patricians in their reserved marble seats, merchants in their finery, plebeians shouting themselves hoarse. Women watched from the upper tiers, some turning away at the bloodshed, others leaning forward with gleaming eyes. Foreigners gazed in wonder at Rome's brutal spectacle. They weren't one beast, but many creatures with different hungers. I learned their language, not Latin, but the silent communication between performer and audience. For the senators, I displayed technique and precision. For the plebeians, raw power and courage. For the women, grace in movement. My signature salute, arm extended, then brought across my chest, became known throughout Rome. When I spun my gladius before the killing blow, the crowd would rise as one. The first time they chanted my name, Flamma, Flamma, it coursed through my veins like the finest wine from Campania. 10,000 voices becoming one for me. I, who had been nothing, a slave, property, now made their god for an afternoon. I began to need it, that thunder of approval. Victories meant nothing without their roar. The silence between games became a torment I could scarcely bear. But their love was fickle. I watched champions before me fall from favor. One poor performance, one moment of cowardice, and the same voices that had elevated them to godhood howled for their destruction. I fought through injuries that would fell lesser men, knowing that to show weakness was to invite their contempt. Their adoration was both my greatest reward and my heaviest chain. In my 10th year, after a victory that left me more dead than alive, I realized a truth while they screamed my name. They loved not Flamma the man, but Flamma the myth, the desert-born killer who defied death. They knew nothing of my dreams, my fears, the face I saw in quiet moments. Their worship filled my purse and my reputation, but left my soul echoing like an empty tomb. Yet still I craved it. Perhaps that was my greatest defeat. The crowd roared my name as I stood over Titus, the Thracian champion who had slain 20 men before meeting my blade. Blood from his shoulder wound pooled beneath him as he raised his finger in submission. The Praetorian prefect himself approached the podium, whispering to Caligula. The new emperor, barely ruling a year, leaned forward with curious eyes. I knew what was coming before the herald's trumpet sounded. Flamma, thrice champion of Rome, the herald's voice carried across the Flavian. His imperial majesty offers you the rudis, freedom from the arena. The wooden sword glinted in the sunlight. I was 37 now, my body a map of scars and glory. The crowd fell silent, waiting. Caligula, unlike Tiberius, loved spectacle and pageantry. This was theater to him, my life reduced to imperial entertainment. My Lannister's eyes narrowed from the sidelines, calculating the gold he would lose should I accept. My brothers in arms watched with a mixture of envy and disbelief. Freedom was the dream that sustained most through bloody training and brutal combat. But what awaited me beyond these walls? A world I no longer understood, where my only skill was killing for applause. I approached the Emperor's box and knelt, feeling the sand against my scarred knees. Then I rose and shook my head. The crowd erupted like Vesuvius. They stamped and screamed until the very foundations trembled. Caligula himself stood, applauding my choice with genuine surprise. I had refused the rudies twice before, but this third denial transformed me into something more than man, a legend born of blood and sand. That evening, poets and scribes gathered outside our ludus. I heard them comparing me to Achilles, to Hercules. Flamma, who thrice refused freedom, they wrote, who chose glory over life. My name would outlive my flesh, they promised. The lanista doubled the price for my appearances, and nobles clamored to have me fight at their games. I had become Rome's favorite son, not by birth, but by blood. Alone in my cell that night, I traced the outlines of my scars in the darkness. Had I made a terrible mistake? Was I now forever trapped in this cycle of sand and steel, with no escape but death? The wooden sword would never be offered again. I had chosen my path, and the gates behind me had closed forever. The legend of Flamma would live eternal, but the man behind it would surely die in this arena. They called me the undefeated long before it was true. My 34th victory sparked whispers that grew to roars. By my 40th, tales of my exploits had spread beyond Rome's walls to distant provinces. I heard merchants from Alexandria speak of me as if I were descended from Mars himself. My name, Flamma, had become more than a gladiator's title. It had transformed into legend, a story told in taverns and palaces alike. The stories they invented amused me at first. I supposedly killed 3 lions with my bare hands in Capua. In Tarentum, I had defeated 10 men simultaneously. Some claimed I was a fallen Parthian prince, others that I was blessed by Neptune after surviving a shipwreck. None bothered to learn I was simply a Syrian who had lost his freedom. The truth was too ordinary for the legend they craved. I felt pride hearing my name spoken with such reverence, I cannot deny it. Yet there was something unsettling about becoming a myth while still drawing breath. I would listen to men describe battles I had fought, adding details that never occurred, erasing wounds I had suffered, transforming my desperate struggles into choreographed displays of superhuman skill. The Flamma they described was not me. Others used my name for their own purposes. Philosophers in the forum debated whether my repeated rejections of the rudies represented stoic virtue or foolish pride. Politicians cited me when speaking of courage and duty. Syrian immigrants claimed me as their champion. I had become a symbol, my actual thoughts deemed irrelevant to the meanings others projected upon me. The strangest sensation was meeting those who had memorized facts about me that were pure invention. A wealthy merchant once insisted I had trained in the Egyptian desert with mystics who taught me to control my breathing underwater. He would not believe my denials. "Modesty becomes you, Flamma," he said with a knowing smile, as though we shared a secret. I was a stranger to my own story. I realized then that my legend had grown beyond my control, beyond even my death whenever it might come. The Flamma in stories would live forever, performing impossible feats for eternity. But would anything of the true man remain? The Syrian who missed the smell of his homeland's cooking, who felt fear before each fight, who longed for simple human connection? Or would the myth consume all truth, leaving nothing but marble and exaggeration? The whispers came first in the baths, where guards grew lax and tongues loosened. I heard them in early summer of 39 CE, murmurs of unrest spreading through Rome's enslaved masses. A Thracian house slave mentioned Spartacus with reverence while washing my back after training. His eyes darted nervously as he spoke of changes coming soon. I nodded but said nothing. The arena had taught me that hope was a luxury that bled easily. Gladiators were the perfect messengers for rebellion. We traveled between households for private fights, carried between estates like exotic pets. The wealthy never considered that we listened, remembered, connected the fragments. I learned of gatherings in the Subura district, of weapons slowly stockpiled. My reputation granted me access to these secrets they believed the champion Flamma would surely yearn for true freedom, not merely the wooden sword of retirement. Yet I hesitated. The memories of failed rebellions haunted Rome's collective mind. I had seen the 6,000 crosses lining the Appian Way as a child, the aftermath of Spartacus's defeat. Each crucified man a warning that echoed through generations. The masters had made examples of them, letting birds feast on their remains for months. Freedom purchased with blood often led only to more elaborate deaths. Was I a coward for seeing this truth? My position grew precarious. The Lanista suspected something when he caught me speaking with a Numidian cook known for revolutionary ideas. Meanwhile, the plotters grew impatient with my non-committal responses. "You fight for their entertainment," hissed a scarred dock worker during the feast where I performed, "yet won't fight for your brother's liberty." I felt trapped between worlds too privileged for the desperate, too dangerous for the powerful. The decision came upon me suddenly one night. A Greek called Timaeus, who supplied scrolls to patrician homes, approached me with specific plans, names, dates, access points to the Senator Galba's armory. They would strike during the Ludi Romani when guards would be distracted. He pressed a small knife into my palm. "For your answer," he said, "blood on the training post by dawn means you stand with us. Nothing means we never spoke." I spent that night pacing my cell, the knife heavy in my hand. Freedom through bloodshed or continued life in golden chains. By first light, I made my choice. I approached the post, knife concealed in my palm. The morning guard watched lazily as I began my training routine. What I did next would determine many fates beyond my own. I thought of my father's words before the slavers took me. "A man chooses the battles that define him." I met Livia during my 3rd year in the Ludus. She was a perfume seller who gained special permission to visit the Gladiator quarters. Her dark eyes caught mine across the courtyard, and something passed between us. Recognition, perhaps, of shared loneliness. When she returned the following week, I found myself lingering near her stall, pretending interest in her wares while drinking in her quiet laughter. Our meetings began innocently enough, brief conversations as she packed her vials. But soon we found ways to steal moments alone. Behind the armory, I pressed her hand to my chest and confessed how her visits had become the center of my existence. "I am dead already," I told her, "but when you're near, I remember what it was to be alive. She kissed me then, tasting of honey and defiance. For months we lived for stolen moments, a touch as she passed my cell, whispers in the shadows of the training yard. The Lannista's assistant was bribed. Guards looked away. I told her of Syria, of olive groves and my mother's songs. She spoke of her childhood in Capua before being sold to pay family debts. In each other's stories, we found escape from our cages. After my 20th victory, they granted me a private cell. That night, Livia came to me. We made love on my thin pallet, our bodies speaking what words could not. If things were different, she whispered against my neck, we would have a home, children. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to imagine it. A simple house, her belly swollen with our child, my hands calloused from honest work instead of sword play. Reality shattered our dreams when Petronius, a wealthy patron, noticed Livia during a visit. He offered to buy her contract from her master. When she refused his advances, he discovered our affair and threatened to report her for contaminating valuable imperial property. Me. The punishment would be crucifixion for her, flogging for me. We had one night to decide our fate. Dawn found us with reddened eyes and resolved hearts. Live, I told her, kissing her palms. Find someone who can give you that home. She left Rome that morning, bound for her cousin's farm in Campania. I returned to the arena with new fury, each victory a message sent into the void. I survived this day too, my love. I fight now not for the crowd's roar, but for the memory of your whispers. My blood was worth more than gold, I realized. The Lannista Severus showed me his ledger one night after I'd won my 10th consecutive match. Thousands of sesterces changed hands on my victories. The wealthy patricians placed wagers that would feed a family for years. My name on the roster doubled attendance. You're an investment that keeps paying dividends. Severus laughed, clapping my shoulder with unexpected familiarity. They sold clay figurines of me in the streets. Children played at being Flamma the Unconquered. Merchants paid to have my name associated with their wine or oil. I remained property while others grew rich from my sweat and risk. When I asked Severus for a percentage, he laughed until tears streamed down his face. Next, you'll want your freedom. Still, my value bought me small privileges. Better food, private quarters, choice of training partners. The mathematics of death were precise. A major games brought 50,000 spectators, paying between 2 and 50 sesterces depending on their seats. Gambling exceeded 100,000 sesterces per match. My market value had reached 100,000 sesterces, more than 20 common laborers would earn in their lifetimes. Yet I received nothing but continued existence. I began to understand why some champions became bitter, throwing matches despite the mortal consequences. Severus changed toward me as my fame grew. No longer just a piece of flesh to be trained and profited from, I became his prized possession. He consulted me on opponent matchups, brought physicians for minor injuries, even invited me to dine at his villa. Our relationship remained that of owner and property, but a valuable horse receives better care than a common mule. I learned to negotiate through suggestion rather than demand. The corruption ran deeper than I'd imagined. I witnessed referees bribed to overlook fatal strikes against favored fighters. Gladiators paid to take falls in preliminary matches. Physicians declaring men dead who still breathed. Even water sellers colluded with gamblers, serving drugged drinks to targeted fighters. The games were theater, yes, but with a script often written by gold rather than the gods. I kept these observations silent. Such knowledge was dangerous. I was both central and irrelevant to the business of blood. My skill brought fortunes to others while I remained a living tool. Yet, understanding the system gave me power I hadn't possessed before. I began requesting specific opponents, suggesting match dates aligned with festivals. I cultivated wealthy patrons who pressured Severus for my proper treatment. If I was to risk death for others' entertainment and enrichment, I would extract every advantage possible from my temporary value. Before each battle, I knelt at the small shrine of Nemesis near our barracks. The goddess of retribution watched over all gladiators, deciding who deserved victory. I traced the wheel symbol on my chest, whispering prayers in both Latin and my native Syrian tongue. Some brothers in arms laughed at my devotion, but I noticed how they too made secret gestures to their gods when death loomed close. The Romans celebrated their gods through our blood. During the festival of Mars, I fought 3 men in succession, each death dedicated to the war god's glory. The priests circled the arena beforehand, sprinkling sacred water and chanting. I wondered if Mars truly desired such offerings, or if men merely used divine names to justify their thirst for spectacle. Still, I felt something powerful in those moments, a connection to forces beyond mortal understanding. I kept my Syrian gods close to my heart. At night I whispered prayers to Atargatis, goddess of my homeland, though I dared not speak her name loudly among Romans. Many gladiators followed Mithras, the soldier's deity, whose mysteries promised rebirth through blood and courage. His temples welcomed men like us, warriors who faced death daily. I visited once, curious about their underground ceremonies and bull sacrifices. My rituals became as important as my training. I never entered the arena without touching the small stone amulet from Syria, hidden in my subligaculum. Before combat, I always took 3 deep breaths, visualizing victory. I refused to step first with my left foot, bad fortune according to the veterans. These habits kept fear at bay, giving me control when fate seemed to hold all power. Did the gods favor certain fighters? I pondered this after surviving against a man stronger and more skilled than myself. He slipped in a puddle of blood at the crucial moment, allowing my strike to find his throat. The crowd called it divine intervention. Perhaps Fortuna herself guided my blade that day, or perhaps it was merely chance, the cruel randomness that governed our lives in the arena. My 43rd fight brought a spiritual crisis. I faced a young Syrian who called to our homeland gods before we fought. When my trident pierced his chest, his eyes met mine with recognition. 2 displaced sons of the same soil. That night, I dreamt of a judgment in the afterlife. My soul weighed against a feather. I woke understanding that the gods had placed me here not as punishment, but as their instrument. My survival had purpose beyond glory. The whispers reached us before the official news. Strange tensions in the ludus, trainers huddled in corners, speaking in hushed tones. I felt it first in the way our lanista paced, his eyes darting to the gates whenever messengers arrived. Then came the shocking revelation. Emperor Caligula had been assassinated. His own Praetorian Guard had turned on him. Even in our isolated world of sand and blood, the tremors of Rome's political earthquake reached us. Claudius, the limping scholar whom many had dismissed, now wore the purple. I recalled seeing him once at the games, always in Caligula's shadow, always overlooked. The ludus buzzed with speculation. Would the new emperor favor the games as his predecessor had? Caligula had been excessive, staging elaborate spectacles where gold flowed like water. He'd once forced an entire section of spectators into the arena when he grew bored. We gladiators had learned to read imperial moods. Our lives depended on it. The changes came swiftly. Training schedules intensified. Our lanista received new orders. Claudius needed spectacles, but different from Caligula's chaotic displays. Organized, our trainer explained. Methodical, historical reenactments, naval battles. The new emperor appreciates. Structure. I understood immediately. Claudius sought legitimacy through tradition, not excess. For veterans like me, this meant opportunity. New emperors always needed old champions. Familiar faces the crowd could cheer while adjusting to unfamiliar imperial banners. I had survived 3 emperors now. Tiberius barely acknowledged our existence, preferring his island pleasures to the arena's roar. Caligula treated us as his personal playthings, sometimes rewarding lavishly, other times condemning capriciously. And now, Claudius, calculating, cautious Claudius, who saw the games as political tools rather than mere entertainment. Each transition had brought danger, but also opportunity for those who could adapt. The smart gladiators learned to perform for the emperor's particular tastes. The officials who visited our ludus changed too. Gone were Caligula's drunken companions, replaced by serious men with scrolls and calculating eyes. They measured our performances against costs, evaluated which fighters drew the largest crowds. The emperor requires stability, one told our lanista. The people must see that Rome's traditions continue uninterrupted. I recognized the political current beneath these words. Claudius had not been born to rule. He needed the people's love more desperately than his predecessors. Last night, I overheard our lanista speaking with a palace messenger. Games unlike any Rome has seen, the man promised. The emperor wishes to commemorate his British victories. My stomach tightened with both anticipation and dread. Grand celebrations meant opportunity for glory, but also heightened danger. As I lay on my pallet that night, I traced the scars across my body, each a memory of survival. Would Claudius' games add new marks to my collection? Or would they finally write the end of my story? I knew the moment would come again. Emperor Claudius himself had returned from Britannia, his conquest celebrated with magnificent games. At 45, my body bore the scars of countless battles. My left shoulder never quite healed from that Thracian's blade 3 years prior. Yet they still called for me. Flamma, the unconquered. The wooden sword awaited for the 4th time, unprecedented in the annals of Rome. No gladiator had ever refused freedom thrice, let alone faced a 4th offer. The opponent they selected was calculated, Decimus, 20 years my junior, renowned for his speed. The crowd roared as we entered the arena, the afternoon sun glinting off Claudius's imperial box. I no longer possessed the quickness of youth, but time had given me patience. Decimus circled like a predator, his confidence palpable. His first strike came like lightning, but I had seen such attacks 1,000 times. I stepped aside, conserving energy, letting his eagerness work against him. By the third exchange, Decimus was breathing heavily. His youth made him predictable, always attacking my left side, my known weakness. When he lunged again, I feigned vulnerability, then pivoted unexpectedly. My shield caught him off balance, and my gladius found its mark. Not a killing blow, I had long since learned the value of mercy, but decisive. Decimus fell to his knees, defeated by a man who should have been too old for victory. The crowd erupted as Decimus raised his finger in submission. Emperor Claudius himself stood, his gesture unmistakable. The Praetorian approached with the rudis, that wooden sword of freedom, extended toward me for an unprecedented 4th time. The arena fell silent. I could hear my own heartbeat, feel the eyes of thousands upon me. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Rome waited for my answer, though many already knew what it would be. I looked at the wooden sword, then at Claudius, and slowly shook my head. The collective gasp was like a gale. I had chosen the arena over freedom once more, but not for the reasons of my youth. This was no longer about glory or fear of the outside world. The sands had become my home, my purpose. In the arena, I understood truth in its purest form. Out there, I would be just another freedman. Here, I remained Flamma, master of my fate in the only way Rome never expected. That night, alone in my cell, I felt a profound peace wash over me. The decision had been simpler than ever before. Rome had taken a Gallic boy and made him a slave, then a gladiator. But in refusing freedom 4 times, I had claimed something they could never understand, a life entirely of my choosing. I had become more than legend. I was a living myth, and myths, unlike men, never truly die. Tomorrow would bring another fight, another day on the sands. I was ready. I first noticed it during morning exercises, a sharp pain in my shoulder where the Thracian's blade had found me years ago. The wound had healed, but something remained broken beneath. I dismissed it, as I had 100 other pains. By midday, I couldn't raise my shield arm above my head. The realization struck harder than any gladius. My body was beginning to fail me. At 43, I had outlived most men of my profession. The crowd still chanted, "Flamma," but they hadn't felt my joints creak each morning or seen how I soaked in hot baths for hours after training. My Syrian grandmother had taught me remedies, poultices of herbs and honey for inflammation, tinctures of willow bark for pain. I began to seek out physicians, both Roman and foreign, desperate for solutions. I changed my training regimen, focusing on precision rather than power. Where once I practiced strikes 100 times, I now performed them 20 times with perfect form. I modified my diet on the advice of an Egyptian physician. More fish, fewer breads, strange bitter teas. At night, alone in my quarters, I would test myself. Simple movements that had once been effortless now required concentration. The younger fighters began watching me differently. Their eyes held a predatory gleam I recognized all too well. I had once looked at aging champions the same way. During sparring, they would test me, pushing harder, seeking weaknesses. I adapted, using feints and misdirection where once I relied on speed. I cultivated an air of unpredictability that made them hesitate. buying precious moments for my slower reflexes. I began to study my opponents more carefully than ever before. Where was his weight centered? Which shoulder tensed before he struck? I learned to read intentions rather than react to movements. The lanista noticed my changing style and nodded with approval. "You fight smarter now," he said. I didn't tell him it was because I could no longer fight harder. Pride still lived in me, even as strength began to fade. The feast of Mars brought my greatest test, a Gaul, massive and young, with arms like tree trunks. The crowd expected my defeat. I fought differently that day, conserving energy, letting him tire himself. When his frustration peaked, I struck. My victory came not from strength, but from the wisdom of 1,000 fights. As they chanted my name, I tasted blood in my mouth and wondered how many more such victories remained in this betraying body of mine. I first noticed Titus during the morning drills. A Thracian by birth, captured in some forgotten skirmish, yet he moved with uncommon grace. While others flailed wildly at the wooden posts, his strikes were measured, deliberate. He reminded me of myself 30 years ago, that same hunger in his eyes, that same coiled tension before he struck. The lanista saw it too, pairing us together with a knowing nod. "This one," he muttered, "might survive more than a season." Training Titus became my unexpected purpose. Each morning I corrected his stance, showed him how to anticipate an opponent's strike by watching their shoulders, not their eyes. "The crowd wants blood," I told him, "but judges reward control." He absorbed everything, asking questions I'd never considered. When I demonstrated my signature feint, the move that had saved my life countless times, he mastered it by sundown. His talent unsettled me. I'd never seen anyone learn so quickly. "Your weakness isn't your arm, but your mind," I told him one evening as we cleaned our practice blades. "You think too much about dying." He looked startled. "How did you survive so long?" he asked. I considered lying, spinning some tale of extraordinary skill. Instead, I gave him the truth. I learned to make each match a story the crowd couldn't bear to see end. Become their hero, and they'll demand your life be spared, even in defeat. The day of Titus's first real combat arrived faster than I'd hoped. I bound his arm guards myself, tightening the leather with practiced hands. "Remember, let him strike first," I murmured, "then counter when he's extended." Strange emotions churned within me. Pride, certainly, but also a gnawing jealousy. His future stretched before him while mine dwindled. As he entered the arena, I realized I was preparing my replacement, watching youth eclipse age as it always must. Titus fought brilliantly that day, when his opponent, a hulking Gaul with twice his experience, lunged forward. Titus executed my feint perfectly. The crowd roared as the Gaul stumbled. 3 precise strikes later, victory was his. I found myself on my feet, shouting with the masses. Later, as physicians tended his minor wounds, Titus sought me out. "I heard your voice above all others," he said. "It steadied me when I faltered." That night we shared wine under the stars, away from the others. "Will it always be like this?" Titus asked. "The fear before, the emptiness after?" I studied his young face, still unmarked by the years of combat that had carved mine. "No," I answered truthfully. "Someday you'll fight without fear. That's when you must be most careful." He nodded, understanding what I'd learned too late, that surviving was only half the battle. The harder part was remembering why survival mattered. The arena I first knew has vanished like morning mist. Under Claudius, our combats transformed into grand spectacles. No longer was it enough to fight well. We needed to entertain. The Emperor himself attended more frequently, bringing with him new expectations. I watched as they introduced elaborate stage machinery, flooding the arena for mock naval battles that left me bewildered. The pure contest of arms I had mastered was becoming something else entirely. New types of gladiators appeared with weapons I'd never seen in my youth. The Dimacharius fought with 2 swords, the Lacarius with a noose. The games grew longer, more theatrical. Blood remained the currency of the arena, but now it required pageantry. I adapted, learning to play to the crowd with flourishes and gestures that once would have seemed dishonorable. My trainers frowned, but the spectators roared their approval. The crowds changed too. Where once they appreciated technique and courage, now they hungered for novelty. Exotic beasts from Africa and Asia were paraded before fights. Men battled crocodiles from Egypt, lions from Numidia. I overheard patricians complaining when matches ended too quickly. They wanted prolonged suffering for their denarii. The editor of the games began dictating how we should fight, how long to draw out the contest. The young fighters who joined our ludus knew nothing else. They practiced their death scenes as diligently as their sword thrusts. Narcissus, a Greek boy barely 17, spent hours perfecting his dying pose. "The crowd remembers how you fall," he told me earnestly. I laughed then, but later watched how the spectators cheered his theatrical death more enthusiastically than they had his skillful fighting. Perhaps he understood something I did not. I found myself caught between worlds, too experienced to embrace these new ways wholeheartedly, too pragmatic to reject them. The veterans like me spoke of the old days with reverence, while the lanista mocked us as relics. "Your generation fought for honor," he said, "but these men fight for Rome's pleasure." I wanted to argue, but the truth stung like salt in a fresh wound. We had become actors in armor, not warriors. Yet I adapted as I always had. Rome itself was changing, expanding, evolving. The wooden amphitheaters of my youth were being replaced with stone. Rumors spread of a massive new arena planned for the city center. I realized then that just as Rome transformed, so must her games and her gladiators. I belonged to neither the past nor the future, but to this moment of transition, perhaps the most interesting time to be alive after all. Last night, the faces came again. Titus the Gaul, first to fall to my blade in the arena. His eyes were wild with fear, not of me but of the crowd. I remember how his hands trembled on his shield. The fever had weakened him. He should never have fought that day. When my sword found his throat, he looked almost grateful. 17 years have passed, yet I still pour libations for him on the Ides of each month. Marcus Africanus haunts me most frequently. We trained together for 3 years. He called me brother. In the Emperor's Games of 29, we faced each other unexpectedly. The crowd demanded death when he fell. I hesitated. He whispered, "Make it clean, Flamma." I did. That night I began carving small wooden figures, one for each fallen fighter. My collection now fills an entire chest beneath my bed. The Greek, Apollonius, died laughing. Strangest death I've witnessed. Disarmed by Carpophorus, he suddenly roared with laughter at some private joke before the fatal thrust. The Numidian twins fought back to back until the end, refusing to be separated even in death. Vibius the Spaniard prayed to his gods as his lifeblood soaked the sand. Each death different, yet the sand drank their blood the same. Death terrified me once. I'd wake drenched in sweat, certain each coming match would be my last. Now, we're old acquaintances, death and I. I've seen it arrive swiftly and mercifully, or slowly and cruelly. I've delivered it with my own hands 97 times. The priests say we meet our ancestors in the afterlife. If so, I'll have quite the reception, half welcoming me, half seeking vengeance. Will my own death be remembered? Unlikely. Another body dragged through the gate of death. Another name scratched off some Lannister's roster. The crowd that once chanted, "Flamma! Flamma!" will scarcely pause before cheering the next match. Only Livia might mourn genuinely. Perhaps Antonius, if he outlives me. The rest will simply place bets on who replaces me as champion. Tonight, as I do each new moon, I burned cedar and sage in my quarters. I spoke the names of the fallen, all I could remember. I poured wine for the forgotten ones. This ritual keeps me sane. The philosopher Seneca once told me that acknowledging death's inevitability grants freedom. Perhaps, but I've found something else in honoring those who fought well, regardless of victory. I've discovered how to live. The whispers reached me before the official summons. Decius Salvius, the undefeated Thracian, had requested me as his opponent. At 41, my body bore the map of 23 years in the arena. I knew what they said in the Ludus, Flamma is past his prime. Perhaps they were right. I sensed this would be my final battle, my last dance with Mars. That night, I cleaned my armor with unusual care, each scrape of cloth against metal, a meditation on mortality. My Lannister arranged special training sessions. "Decius fights low and strikes like a viper," he warned. I nodded, having studied the young champion from the stands. While he possessed the speed of youth, I carried experience in my bones. Each morning, I rose before dawn to strengthen my shield arm, knowing it would bear the brunt of his assault. In the afternoons, I practiced defensive postures until they flowed from memory rather than thought. I remembered my first victory in Capua, how the crowd's roar had intoxicated me. Then came the matches in Rome, where Emperor Tiberius himself had awarded me the rudies after my 15th win, which I declined. The memories flowed like wine, the German giant I defeated, despite a broken rib, the near death against Carpophorus, the 5 consecutive triumphs that earned me my name, Flamma, the flame that would not extinguish. 3 nights before the match, Aurelia visited me, the noble woman who had followed my career since her youth, now with silver threading her hair. "You need not enter the arena again," she whispered. "I could arrange your purchase." I kissed her palm but shook my head. This ending was mine to write. The next day, I sent for the finest wine and shared it with the other veterans, men who understood what it meant to face mortality as entertainment. The night before battle, I performed the rituals that had sustained me. I anointed my body with the oil from Hispania, ate the simple meal of figs and bread that had preceded every victory, and sacrificed to Nemesis, protector of gladiators. Later, I wrote 3 letters, one to my sister in Sicily, one to Aurelia, and one to the boy who had served as my attendant these past years. I slept deeply, without dreams. Dawn broke clear and bright. I dressed methodically, each piece of armor a familiar weight. My lanista clasped my shoulder without words. None were needed after so many years. The roar reached me before I saw the sand, 30,000 voices calling my name. I stepped into the sunlight, shield raised in salute. Across the arena stood Decius, young and fearless. The crowd's chant washed over me like a tide. Flamma! Flamma! For perhaps the last time. My final fight ended as the sun reached its zenith. I limped from the arena, blood-soaked yet alive, my name echoing through the Colosseum. Flamma! Flamma! The crowd's chant followed me into the shadows. That night, I learned my name had been scratched into tavern walls from Ostia to Capua. Children played at being me in the streets. Strange to think that while my body would someday fail, my name might outlive the marble monuments of emperors. I've seen the graffiti they draw of me, crude figures with my rudies held high. In Pompeii they've painted me larger than life on tavern walls, my victories tallied beneath. Merchants sell clay lamps bearing my likeness. Like Spartacus and Carpophorus before me, I've become more symbol than man. Wealthy patricians commission mosaics of my greatest triumphs for their villas, though they've never felt the arena sand beneath their feet or the weight of the crowd's judgment. The stories they tell, gods how they distort. They claim I slew 3 men with a single thrust, that I was born to a priestess of Mars, that I cannot be killed. A poet wrote verses claiming I fought with divine favor. The wealthy Lucius Valerius boasts that he once sponsored me, though I never fought under his banner. My victories grow more spectacular with each retelling. My defeats vanish entirely, as if Fortuna never once turned her face from me. I paid a Greek scribe to record my true accounts. 3 scrolls of parchment now hold my life, not the myths, but the blood and dust and fear. I commissioned a modest stone relief near the Ludus where I trained, showing not my victories, but my comrades who fell. I tell my story to any who will listen, not of glory, but of survival, of the brotherhood forged in chains, of the moments between fights when we were simply men, not legends. What is immortality? Not the marble statues that crumble, nor the inscriptions that fade. Perhaps it lives in how I changed the art of the trident and net, techniques now taught to every retiarius. Or in the mercy I showed opponents when the crowd demanded death. Maybe in how I maintained dignity despite the collar. The wealthy build tombs and monuments, but a gladiator's immortality is written in sand temporary, yet witnessed by thousands. When I am gone and my name is spoken, I hope they remember this. I was Flamma, who fought 34 times and stood undefeated 19. Not because I was favored by gods or born for glory, but because I refused to yield to fear. I was a man who found freedom within bondage, dignity within shame. My true victory was not in the arena, but in remaining human when all conspired to make me beast. That is the legacy I choose. Not written in stone, but in the hearts of those who truly knew me. The wound in my side refused to heal. Each morning, I awoke to find fresh blood on my bedding, a crimson reminder that 45 years had worn this body to its limits. I had survived 34 battles in the arena, but this final enemy, time itself, was one I could not defeat with sword or trident. The lanista noticed my labored breathing during training yesterday. His eyes held what I had never seen before, pity. One final spectacle, Flamma, the lanista told me as we walked the perimeter of the training ground. The Emperor himself requested you by name. I nodded, knowing what remained unspoken. My legend would end cleanly, with dignity, a rare gift in our profession. I had survived 9 missio appeals, but this time I would not raise my finger. This time the sand would receive my final breath. My fellow gladiators came to me one by one. Young Atticus brought wine stolen from the guards. Brutus, my longtime rival, clasped my forearm with unexpected emotion. "You showed me what it means to fight with honor," he said, his voice breaking. Even Cassius, who had always kept his distance, nodded respectfully as he passed my cell. In their eyes, I saw my legacy, not the Syrian slave I had been, but the fighter I had become. Livia came at dusk, slipping past the guards with practiced ease. She had aged alongside me, her beauty deepening with the years. "I have saved enough," she whispered against my chest, "for proper rites, for remembrance." I held her tightly, remembering the young tavern girl who had first tended my wounds decades ago. Some victories are measured not in combat, but in moments of tenderness stolen from a brutal world. I wrote my will that night, not on parchment, for I had never learned those Roman letters, but in gifts distributed with purpose. My prized dagger to Atticus, my leather amulet from Syria to Livia, the gold coins sewn into my mattress, payment for 34 victories, divided among those who had shown me kindness. From nothing I came to Rome, and with nothing I would leave, save the name I had carved into its memory. The night before my final battle, I stood alone on the balcony overlooking the city. Rome sprawled before me, magnificent and terrible, the empire that had enslaved me and immortalized me in the same breath. I had killed and nearly been killed countless times for its entertainment. Yet somehow, in the shadow of death, I felt strangely free. Tomorrow would end my story, but tonight I owned every scar, every victory, every choice that had led me here. The Flavian amphitheater blazed with afternoon sun as I stepped onto the sand one final time. The Decennalia celebrations for Emperor Hadrian had drawn Rome's finest citizens, their silks and jewels glittering across 50,000 seats. 20 years I had fought here, yet never had the arena felt so vast, so hungry. I inhaled deeply, savoring the familiar scent of sand, sweat, and anticipation. The lanista had granted me an elaborate entrance. 4 trumpeters, dancers scattering rose petals, my name emblazoned on banners of crimson and gold. The crowd's roar washed over me like a physical force. "Flamma! Flamma!" They chanted, stomping until the very foundations trembled. I raised my trident and net in salute, turning slowly to acknowledge each section. Many had watched me since their childhood. Some had bet fortunes on my victories. The Emperor himself nodded in recognition from his gilded box. Across the arena stood my opponent, Tigress of Gaul, younger by 15 years, undefeated in 20 bouts. Tall and lean as a whip, he carried the Psyche, the curved blade that had opened throats across 3 provinces. We circled each other like wolves, feet shifting in patterns worn into my memory through countless combats. The crowd fell to a murmur. Time stretched like honey poured from a jar. I saw everything with preternatural clarity, beads of sweat on Tigress's brow, a falcon wheeling overhead, the slight depression in the sand that might catch an unwary foot. He struck first, predictably, his youth demanding action. His blade whistled past my ear as I swayed aside, not yet committing to counter. The dance had begun, and I knew all the steps. His second attack came faster, a flurry of strikes that would have overwhelmed me in my youth. Now I read them like a familiar scroll, parrying with my trident's shaft, letting momentum carry him past. My net flicked out, not to catch, merely to test. The crowd gasped as it grazed his shoulder. We exchanged blows for what seemed like hours, though the shadows had barely moved. Blood flowed from a cut above my eye, another across my ribs. Tigress favored his left leg where my trident had found its mark. Neither of us would surrender easily. The tide turned with a single misstep. Tigress's foot found that depression I had noted earlier. His balance wavered for just a heartbeat. Enough. My net flew true, tangling his sword arm. I closed the distance with a speed that belied my years. Trident aimed not at his heart, but at his weapon hand. The seeker fell to the sand. The crowd erupted, 50,000 voices becoming one thunderous demand. Thumbs turned upward throughout the Colosseum. Even those who had bet against me seemed to recognize the moment's significance. Emperor Hadrian himself stood, extending his arm with thumb raised high. I helped Tigress to his feet, and we stood together, arms raised in mutual respect. The sand had been my home, my battlefield, my canvas for 2 decades. Now it would know me no more. As we walked from the arena, the roar gradually faded like a retreating tide. My final victory secured not just my freedom, but a place in the whispered legends of Rome. I looked back once at the empty expanse of sand, already being raked smooth for tomorrow's games. The ghosts of all my battles seemed to linger there, translucent in the dying light, before dissolving into the gathering dusk. Strange to hover above my own body as they prepared it for burial. Death came swiftly in the arena, yet I lingered, watching. They washed away the blood and dressed me in my finest armor, an honor for a champion. My lanista, once so eager to profit from my victories, now arranged a proper funeral. The crowds that had cheered my kills now gathered to mourn. I felt neither pride nor sorrow, only curiosity at this final spectacle performed in my name. They carried me beyond the city walls, as is custom for all gladiators. Yet unlike the nameless fighters tossed into common pits, I received a stone marker, a testament to fame earned through blood. My remains were not scattered, but placed with care. Some spectators who had wagered fortunes on my matches wept openly. Others spoke in hushed tones of my greatest victories. Death, it seemed, had only enhanced my legend. Delicatus, my armor-bearer for 7 years, commissioned the stone that would bear my name. I watched him argue with the stone carver over every word, every letter. Flamma, secutor, lived 30 years, fought 34 times, won 21 times, fought to a draw 9 times, defeated 4 times, Assyrian by nationality. Cold numbers to sum up blood and pain. Delicatus made this for his deserving comrade in arms. His loyalty moved me, even beyond death. Is this all I was? 34 battles reduced to tallies of victory and defeat. Nothing of my thoughts, my fears, my small moments of joy. Nothing of the boy from Syria who dreamed of freedom. The stone speaks nothing of the nights I stared at stars, wondering if my family gazed upon the same sky. Yet I cannot fault Delicatus. Such was the custom. In Rome, a gladiator was measured by his victories, not by the contents of his heart. For weeks they came to my stone. Young fighters touched it for luck. Wealthy patrons who had cheered me laid wreaths. Women who had never spoken to me in life whispered secrets to my shade. Children reenacted my famous battles with wooden swords. My existence condensed into stories, some true, many embellished. I felt myself becoming less a man and more a legend with each passing day. My earthly concerns faded like morning mist. As I drift further from the world of flesh, I leave you these words. We are more than the marks we leave on stone, more than victories tallied or defeats endured. I was not merely Flamma the Syrian, the secutor with 21 wins. I loved, I feared, I dreamed. Remember this when you stand before monuments of great men. Behind every name etched in stone breathed a person who, like you, sought meaning in a world that offers no promises beyond the certainty of its end. I felt myself drawn to it, this massive oval amphitheater rising from where Nero's lake once stood. Strange to witness what I could never touch. The Flavian amphitheater, they called it. My spirit lingered among the crowds as they streamed through numbered arches. 70,000 souls packed onto marble seats, arranged by rank just as in my day. The anticipation in the air was familiar. That electric tension before blood was spilled. Some things never change, even decades after my flesh returned to dust. I heard my name whispered among the spectators. Flamma, like an invocation for victory. Young gladiators performed rituals before their matches, touching crude drawings of my helmet for luck. One Thracian fighter had even taken my name as his arena identity. His techniques were flashy, designed for show rather than survival. I would have dispatched him in moments, yet I felt a strange pride watching him salute the Emperor with my gesture arm extended, fist closed, then open. The games had grown more elaborate since my time. Emperor Titus flooded the arena for mock naval battles, ships colliding while men fought and drowned for entertainment. Exotic beasts from Africa and Asia tore at prisoners. I watched hundreds of lions slaughtered in a single day. The spectacle had become grander, more excessive. Yet beneath the pageantry, I recognized the same crude purpose: to distract the masses with blood and remind them of Rome's power over life and death. I witnessed Emperor Domitian's games, celebrating victories over the Dacians. A gladiator named Verus received the wooden rudies after his 16th victory. Freedom earned through survival, just as I had done 4 times. Unlike me, he accepted. I followed him as he walked from the arena into sunlight, watching him weep openly in the street. Did he know what awaited? Freedom without purpose, haunted by arena ghosts. Some men never truly leave the sand behind. I understood then why I had always chosen to return. The monument itself was a contradiction, built by Jewish slaves captured when Jerusalem fell, yet celebrated as Rome's crowning achievement. I felt kinship with those workers, their hands bloodied on stone as mine had been on weapons. This arena stood as testament to Rome's brutal efficiency in conquest, in entertainment, in memory. From my ethereal vantage, I watched emperors rise and fall, games evolve, yet the crowd's hunger remained constant. They came for the same reason they had in my day, to witness men facing death with courage. Centuries would pass. I would watch this mighty arena crumble, stripped of marble, reclaimed by nature. Earthquakes would shake its foundations. Yet something of its essence, and mine, would endure. For what are we but stories told after we're gone? The Syrian slave who fought 34 times and chose the arena over freedom. The Colosseum would become a skeleton, a remnant, but never forgotten. Neither would I. In this, perhaps, lies the only immortality any of us can hope for, to echo through time in the memories of those who come after. I never imagined my name would outlive me by centuries. Long after the arena's sand had drunk my blood, a monk in a scriptorium copied my epitaph into a collection of Roman curiosities. His quill scratched across parchment as he pondered the meaning of my refusal of the rudies. In the flickering candlelight, he wondered if I had been a madman or a saint. Strange to think of my life reduced to an inscription, my choices debated by men who never knew the roar of the crowd. During what they later called the Renaissance, an artist depicted famous gladiators in a grand fresco. There I stood among legends, my posture proud, my trident raised. He knew nothing of my Thracian origins, or the weight of the helmet upon my brow. Yet somehow he captured the defiance in my eyes. Nobles would gaze upon my likeness and speak of ancient virtues while sipping wine in palaces built atop the ruins of the world I knew. In the age of reason, a philosopher found meaning in my refusal of freedom. The gladiator Flamma, he wrote, chose the arena over liberty, suggesting man's natural state may not be freedom but purpose. How little he understood. My choice was not philosophy, but survival. The arena was certainty, food, shelter, respect. Freedom meant poverty, anonymity, and likely death. Yet his misinterpretation gave my life significance to generations who would never know my true reasoning. The earth shifted and I emerged again. Archaeologists unearthed a mosaic bearing my image in what was once Pompeii. They photographed, measured, and argued over the significance of the blue tessera used for my eyes. Remarkable preservation, they declared, unaware that the artisan had never seen me fight. He had based my likeness on tavern tales and boastful descriptions. I would have laughed at the inaccuracies. My arms too long, my stance all wrong. Each era remade me in its image. To Rome, I was entertainment. To Christians, a symbol of pagan excess. To medievalists, a curiosity. To the Enlightenment, a philosophical puzzle. To modernity, a historical footnote. Yet, through it all, I recognized the unchanging nature of those who spoke my name. Their ambitions, fears, and desires mirrored those of the spectators who once cheered my victories. The world transformed beyond recognition, but human hearts remained familiar across the millennia. I achieved immortality, though not as I once imagined. No triumph of flesh and blood, but a fragmented persistence through time. Parts of my story survived while others vanished forever. My name endures. Yet who remembers the taste of the wine I drank before combat? The sound of my mother's voice? The prayers I whispered to gods now forgotten? This strange half-life continues as long as someone, somewhere, speaks my name. Not glory, but remembrance. Perhaps that is victory enough. You who read these words, we are separated by an ocean of time. My bones have long since returned to dust. My arena faded to ruins. Yet here I am, speaking to you across millennia. The distance between us collapses when you hear my voice, when you imagine my battles. I wonder what you see when you picture Flamma, the Syrian gladiator who refused his freedom 4 times. They called it madness, my refusal of the rudies, that wooden sword of liberation. 4 times I stood before the crowd, their thunderous approval washing over me. 4 times the praetor extended the symbol of my freedom. 4 times I declined. History remembers this as my defining choice, but they misunderstood. I was never rejecting freedom. I was claiming it on my terms. What is freedom to a man born in chains? The Syrian boy, torn from his homeland, knew nothing of choice. The gladiator I became understood it perfectly. In the arena, paradoxically, I found sovereignty over my existence. Each fight was my decision, each victory my creation. Outside those walls waited another kind of prison, one of poverty, anonymity, and hollow liberty. Your world worships different gods than mine, but we share the same human questions. What price glory? What meaning can be forged from suffering? What value has a life lived according to one's nature, rather than others' expectations? I did not seek death in the arena. I sought perfect expression of who I truly was. The crowd's roar was merely confirmation of what I already knew. From captive to legend, 34 victories, only 4 defeats. Numbers carved into stone that tell nothing of the blood, the fear, the exhilaration. Nothing of the moment when time slows and the world shrinks to the space between heartbeats. I have watched empires rise and crumble since my death. I have seen my name forgotten, then rediscovered, then pondered by scholars in languages I never knew. My blood darkened the sand long before my name was etched in stone. They say I died a hero. I say I died on my terms. No man gave me freedom. I chose it again and again, with every breath I spent in the arena. And now, if you still speak my name, then perhaps I never died at all. Perhaps none of us truly die while our stories continue to be told.